to call this meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee to order. We have modified our traditional committee meeting order this evening to hold F&A first tonight in order to accommodate any member of the public who would like to speak on the Gateway project. While this meeting is being held in person, in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the public to Zoom in if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate tonight in person. However, if you are participating through Zoom and would like to comment on an item not on our agenda this evening, please note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight and you would like to comment on an item not on our agenda this evening, please raise your hand but stay seated. We will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. If you want to make a comment on an item that is on tonight's agenda, including the Gateway project, please complete the sign-up sheet available at the podium. Or if you are participating in Zoom, please note your desire to speak in the chat feature, as well as the agenda item you would like to speak on. For items listed on tonight's agenda, we will take speakers in the order in which they appear on the sign-up sheet. For Zoom speakers on items on tonight's agenda, you will make your comments through Zoom in the order we receive them in the chat following any comments from tonight's in-person attendees. Please note for Gateway discussions, we will be limiting the public comment to 3 minutes per person. You may speak on the Gateway agenda item for 1 3-minute period per meeting. While you make your comment live or on Zoom, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also, please be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded on the city's and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, please call the roll.
Davis.
Here.
Josie.
Here.
Inman.
Here.
Kring. Here. Ryard.
Here.
Loudon.
Here.
Boultinghouse.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Thank you. We will now proceed with our agenda. Our first item of business this evening is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on an item not included on our agenda? Please note there will be a separate opportunity this evening to comment on Gateway, and so save any Gateway comments until that time. All right. Doesn't look like we have any comments, so we will move forward with public presentations. And our first action, and we do not have any public presentations tonight, so now we will proceed to our action items. The first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes with Robin Folks.
Thank you. Draft minutes of the August 3rd Finance and Administration Committee meeting are included for review and acceptance in your packet.
Yes, Ken?
I'd like to go ahead and have us accept and move this to the consent agenda. I just wanted to make a note on page 11, I believe Robin corrected this in paragraph 4. It said $600, I think, in liability that was assessed on the tax bill annually for the 20-year period. If for some reason the developer does not stay current with the taxes, I think that's been corrected to add a 0. Thank you.
Nice addition. Anyone else have any comments or concerns about moving this to the consent agenda? All right. Our next item this evening is the adoption of the Comprehensive Public Offense Code, UPOC, and Uniform Traffic Code, STO, published by the League of Kansas Municipalities with Chief Madden.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Annually, the League publishes an updated version of the Standard Traffic Ordinance and the Uniform Public Offense Code that allows us to enforce the laws at the state level that are then in an ordinance form. They're updated to reflect the current language of statutes and definitions yearly, and staff recommends approval of both with the adoption of 2 separate ordinances incorporating those. Be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Chief Madden? Yeah, Ken?
Recommend we put this on consent.
Does anyone object to that? All right, consent it is. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Our next item is a discussion of proposed modifications to be made to the city's code regards to massage therapy and massage therapist licensing as a home occupation with Emily Randall.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a continuation from a discussion item we discussed last month. The city were approached by a massage therapist for a new application, and through that process realized that he was interested in practicing out of his home, and B, that the city didn't currently allow it. And so some may have known that, I did not. So we were working through hearing out that request, hearing reasons for and against, or reading through our code and really looking at it, and saw really an opportunity to modernize that section of our code for a lot of reasons, but also hearing no strong objections from this group last month about allowing for a licensed massage therapist to practice out of one's home. We wanted to move forward. So we put that revised ordinance before you in the packet. There are several kind of, I think, categories of updates that we made to it. We went beyond just allowing that expansion of the in-home massage. Then we outlined in the packet a little for you. Just finding some chances to streamline the process. Currently, the massage establishment license application process comes always through the governing body. We already do background check review for zoning issues through our community development and police departments. The city clerk works very closely with all businesses applying for licenses, and in that vein also works with massage therapy and does that approval at the city level. Which is odd in Kansas, but we're one of 4 states that does it that way. So we're already working very closely with those people and felt that it was appropriate with that level of review to move it to an administrative approval process. There were some wording changes that we borrowed from neighboring cities in terms of expansion of the criminal violations, especially around just further language around felonies and sexual misconduct. And that is with children, excuse me. And so then also just modernizing the code language. There was chances for removal of hemline length, et cetera, and gender inclusive language and things like that. So we kind of took a pass at all of it. Since the ink has dried and the packet went out on Friday, we did hear some feedback that I believe that I missed some clarification around the term in-house massage, which I do agree with. There used to be another category, in office. And the intent of our edits, which I don't think are fully reflected in the code language that I put forward, is to allow a licensed therapist who's licensed either out of his or their home or a business establishment in a commercial setting to be able to go to another place. Most likely we were picturing like an office setting. If you have a campus with employees who you'd like to offer massage for, that person could do fully clothed massage, but not in the establishment where the license is based. So that was the intention, but I think there's some cleanup in the language throughout that we can adjust before you would vote on this. But other than that, I think you've seen the redlining in the packet and I could take any questions.
Any questions for Emily? Ken?
I would just like to commend the staff and also Amanda and Stephen Jacoby for bringing this forward. I think that the end product is very positive and congratulate everybody on the work. And I think that clarification will help. At least that was an issue I questioned at the time.
I
So
think so too.
I'm in support of this.
Great.
Anyone else have any comments for Emily or staff?
Oh, when is perfect. So we wanted to just clarify when this would go into effect. So we have to deal with the publication requirements. So it would go into effect after publication, which would be on the 21st, approval, and then publication on the 27th. So the effective date, if it were approved, would be September 28th following publication. Thank you.
Yeah, Ken?
Recommend that we take this to council on non-consent.
Yeah, I'm good with that too. All right, thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Our next item is a discussion of voting delegates for both the League of Kansas Municipalities and the National League of Cities with Robin Folks. Or Mr.
Oh.
It's me. I'll do it this one. Sorry. Failure to communicate earlier today. So each year we have to select voting delegates to represent Mission at both the National League of Cities Conference, which this year is being held here in Kansas City, and the League of Kansas Municipalities Annual Conference. So for the National League of Cities Conference, we select one delegate and one alternate delegate. Attending, currently registered for the NLC conference. We have Mayor Flora, Councilmember Kring, Councilmember Loudon, Councilmember Boultinghouse, Councilmember Thomas, and then myself, Mr. Scott, and Ms. Randall. So stop here and if there's anyone who really wants to be the assigned voting delegate and alternate, please indicate that in interest and.
I would like to be the designee.
Okay. Then for the league conference, we can select up to 3 delegates. So far registered for the league conference are Mayor Flora, Councilmember Thomas, Mr. Scott, and Councilmember Loudon.
So that would be all of us, right?
Are staff eligible to be?
Staff are
delegates?
eligible to be, but we would prefer it would be the elected officials.
Okay, thank you.
So those 3, okay, so those will advance to your agenda for a formal vote and designation on the 21st, and then we will communicate that to the respective bodies at NLC and the league.
All right, thank you. Anyone in the public have any comments on that item before we move on? All right, seeing none, our last item is related to the Mission Gateway project. Ms. Smith, would you please introduce this item for the committee?
Okay, hang on. Karen Schneider and I thought Mr. Kimmel is joining us. Karen Schneider is not. Might be. Okay. Elevating. Exercise. Okay, so thank you all while we're seeing if we have Mr. Kimmel, who had hoped to be here in person and had a change of plans. So he will be joining us and making his presentation via Zoom this evening. And I think he does plan to be here next week. I think everyone's aware that we've calendared a series of meetings related to the Mission Gateway project, that some of them are required by state statute as the council considers the new tax increment financing redevelopment project plan and a new community improvement district petition that have been presented by the developers. We passed resolutions back in August, setting the public hearing for both of those for a September 28th meeting beginning at 6:30 p.m. But in preparation for consideration and hearing those public hearings and then potentially action on those items, we'll have some discussions this evening. We will have a work session that is scheduled for next Wednesday, September 14th. And then again, we will have the opportunity at that meeting on September 28th to review, discuss, answer any questions that you might have. There were obviously no materials included in the packet. The focus of our meeting this evening is really going to be a presentation from Mr. Kimmel with Ehlers Incorporated. They serve as the city's financial advisors, municipal financial advisors. They have been involved with this project since the outset. Also this evening, we have with us Pete Heaven, our land use attorney, and Kevin Wimpy with Gilmore and Bell, our bond counsel. Everyone is part of sort of the city team that has been working on this project for many years. So this evening, Mr. Kimmel will make a presentation on his analysis of the work that he's done with the developers team in reviewing the kind of financial foundation of this project and their pro forma, and answering some of the questions related to the but-for test, but for the requests for incentives or but for the use of incentives, the likelihood that this project as proposed would be able to proceed. So no. You are up. So as soon as we get him teed up here, did you get his presentation? Did it come through? Okay, so he'll have a presentation. As you know, I think if there are opportunities or you have questions as he's going through that presentation, please feel free to just ask those at that time, or if you want to hold those, to the end. Then I think our intent would be for Mr. Kimmel to make that presentation. It would give anybody in the audience or participating virtually an opportunity to make comments. And then we'll turn that back over to any members of the committee who would like to ask questions. Again, there's not a specific action item advancing out of this meeting. This is the start of the journey that we will have over the next several weeks. So if I had a drum, I would give you a drum roll while we
We
wait.
need some of the Jeopardy music that comes in, you know.
You don't want me to sing. I thought about doing the budget presentation as interpretive dance this year, but then thought better of that. So
Are there any department updates you'd like to go through while we're waiting on him?
oh, does anybody? It's been a crazy week and a half. So does anybody have a department update they'd like to? I think he's coming. Anybody have any department updates, Brian? Johnson, well, we'll save that. Spoiler alert, Johnson Drive for the CDC meeting. Oh, do that while I'm.
I can always stall at a microphone. Court software, municipal court software, the implementation, we are going live on Monday. So it has been long awaited, a long time since you all approved the new software. But our two court clerks have been working really, really closely with Tyler Technologies to transfer over the data. We've closed we're not taking any payments for the rest of the week until Monday so that we can do that data transfer. So we'll get that up on the website. Took the links down this afternoon late, but they've been putting in a lot of time. Tyler's been really great working through that process. So we should have an entirely new experience for both our patrons and our staff starting on Monday. So thank you.
We got our ballots.
And just a reminder, I think with the Labor Day holiday, they were slowed. I think this happened to us last year with the street sales tax renewal that everybody's anxiously awaiting. So I've heard lots of positive reviews that ballots have hit. We did post some information on our social media, reminding people of, when they're due and where they can return those ballots.
The one concern I had, I went to the post office right after I got it. I made my signature and I went, the mail was coming out of the mailbox. And I saw at least one of the return envelopes in there. So I went out, I stopped my car and picked them all up. But I mean, they were stuffed beyond.
Okay.
So that's kind of a concern.
We'll continue to remind people that there's a drop box at the county office building at 6,000 Lamar, which is probably as good an option for return of those mail ballots as anything else. That's right. How about Celia or Brent, you want to go ahead and give an update on Johnson Drive real quick? Come on up. We'll knock it out.
How are you, Jasmine?
We're good. Yeah, Johnson Drive update. So I'm sure most of you probably drove it today. They started striping it to the 3-lane configuration. That should continue on through Friday. They're hopefully going to be complete by Friday. If not, it might run into Saturday night, just doing some of the thermo work like the arrows and the crosswalks and stuff. So far, just one complaint phone call today, just, funneling traffic down, heading east, people are going to have to adjust to that, but drove it myself. It seems to be functioning good and looks nice, brand new road. We're also trying a new product, MMA, which is the paint that's supposed to last longer or comparable to thermo on the concrete parking and crosswalks that are on the concrete intersections. That's a different striping crew that does that. So that's going to take place on the 24th or start. And you got to kind of grind off the old paint to put this new MMA paint down. So they're telling me the 24th. So they're always a little aggressive on their timelines. So hopefully by the end of this month, that will be completed. But right now that's scheduled for the 24th. So they'll out there working probably right now. They'll continue long lining and then they'll start coming back doing the crosswalks and getting all the arrows and everything buttoned up. And we'll do a final walkthrough, but close to the finish line. So only one complaint, I will take it. And I think it looks nice, and it's nice to have a new thoroughfare kind of changed up through downtown Mission. So be happy to answer any questions, but we're on the tail end of this one. Yes.
Yeah, I love driving really slow on it today. People behind me couldn't go around me or do anything. It was really nice. But it wasn't intentional, I swear. I'm just wondering at Woodson and Johnson Drive, if we're going to redo the crosswalks there as well. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So all the pavement markings, all the crosswalks, we did all the radiuses on the side streets, so all that will be redone. And I know there's some tackle and stuff at that intersection, so they're aware they need to get that cleaned up and everything, but that's on concrete, so that all gets painted, so we'll definitely address that when we get closer to the end of the month.
Hey, Brad, can you finish on the Reed's Outlook in 62nd Street, the last 2 inches of
Oh, yes.
Paving.
Oh, asphalt. We're talking paving. Yes. So talked to the contractor today. We were going to try to get an update out tomorrow on the website. It's looking like we're going to surface all 3 streets starting next Thursday and Friday. It should be a 2-day process. I don't know where they're starting yet, so I just got that late this afternoon, but hopefully by the next weekend, we'll have all the surface down, and then it'll just be the final restoration for sod. Hopefully by the end of September, but everybody starts laying sod September 1st until, the first snow basically, or when we get some sunshine in December. So, we're pushing on them, but, we gotta do the surface first, and then they'll be coming back in for, asphalt this next Thursday and Friday. So as long as weather doesn't mess us up.
back to Johnson Drive for a second. Those grates that are just to the
Yep.
east of Roland Drive, is that correct?
That's correct. So those are in the project to get adjusted. So since we did that UBES, which is that 5/8 inch surface, you can't really adjust those grates with that kind of surface treatment. So they got to come back, and it's a diamond concrete cutout, and they'll adjust them in concrete. So you'll have a smooth ride because they're on top of an interceptor. So if we did them with the paving operation, you'd never get that smooth ride. So it's always been the plan to do those after. So, I would say the next 2 weeks, they'll be mowing back in just to do a few, crack panels, and they'll get all those grates as well.
Great, thank you.
Do we know when, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kristen.
One at a time.
So it's the same process that is happening on like 62nd. Is that same process going to be happening like on Reed's north of 51st Street? The
Yes.
Sodding and the
Yep.
additional pavement?
Yep.
And then would you like to share the comments from the citizen or person on Johnson Drive if you can? keep
So
it
yeah,
clean?
not calling anybody out, but it's gonna take some adjustment, like I said. So just coming east, down Johnson Drive, and everybody's adjusting, kicking over to that 1-lane configuration to go through traffic, and just was not real happy with that. So I'd say in 6 months, you won't hear anything about it again. So if there's just, if you change people's routes or the way they do things, sometimes it throws them off a little bit. So it wasn't that bad. So yeah, it's good.
I was just gonna ask if we know when Water One's gonna patch them are.
It's supposed to be this week. So they pulled the plate, waiting on it's the same traffic control plan. Texted him on Tuesday when we got back on the holiday, and guaranteed me to be done this week. So I would say the next couple of days. And what happened there, I know they just paved that intersection, but they forgot to add a valve the way I understood it, and had to get back down in there. So nobody likes cutting into a fresh patch. Went through that with them, but they still got to fix their stuff. So it's just one of those things. Anything else? Hit me up. Okay, I'm out.
Thank you.
How are the colors up there?
Bruce, we have your presentation if you're
Oh.
ready for it. I just didn't know what you
Oh.
wanted.
Laura, did you want to say any introductory comments?
I already have.
Oh, okay. Well, good evening, everyone. We don't have colors yet. It's not quite that cold up here, but they're on their way. And I apologize for the delay. My daughter Laura's volleyball practice went longer than expected, and I guess the rest of your F&A agenda went a little bit faster than expected. So, but it's good to be with you, and look forward to going through this overview with you and seeing what questions you have, and so on.
Can we get his volume up a little?
Bruce, I will share the screen and advance slides if you let me know.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
And Emily, is it possible to turn him up a little?
Yeah, maybe. Do you think we have?
I can also sit closer if that.
Oh, yeah, that's better.
Okay, great. All right, well, if we can go to the second slide, I think all of you are aware of this, but I wanted to just recap some of the fundamental points about the Gateway proposal as it currently stands. As you'll recall, phase 1 of the project includes the proposed multifamily housing apartments, the retail uses underneath those apartment uses, the Synergy entertainment venue, as well as the parking structure that will serve the overall development. And phase 2 is really comprised of the proposed hotel and office building. In total, if you look at the total development cost that's been projected, the total, and I have a small error here, the current estimate from the developers is $259 million or $259.5 million. And that's split between phases 1 and 2, as you can see, with about 163 million going towards phase 1 and about 96 million going towards phase 2. You can go to the next slide. Just looking at the phase 1 funding stack, this is the part of the project that the developer feels is very close to being ready to go. They are counting on a construction loan to fund about $65 million of phase 1, a mezzanine loan to fund $46 million, their own equity contribution to fund just under $30 million, and then TIF and CID bond proceeds, special obligation bond proceeds, for about $22.5 million, for a total capital stack, if you will, of about just over $163 million, as noted on the previous slide. I would also point out here that the estimated bond proceeds are a little bit under 14% of the phase 1 funding stack. And that is, it's neither here nor there really as it relates to the city's consideration of the project and its participation in the project. But that is, I would consider, on the low side of a contribution from TIF and CID for a project of this nature. Moving on to the next slide, please, Emily. Today, the development team sent me their current term sheets with their primary or intended construction lender and mezzanine lender as well. And those term sheets are consistent with the estimated funding stack that's in the developer's budget and pro forma workbook. And also, we already had bond runs from DA Davidson, which is the bond underwriter that the city selected to work on this financing along with the developer. And they have provided a bond projection that's consistent with the phase 1 stack as well, i.e. bonds providing a little over $22 million of proceeds for phase 1. I also spoke with development team members this morning about the possibility of phase 1 costs increasing. We know that both construction costs are kind of going up and down some, as well as interest rates. And they've already been in discussions about how to increase their loan and equity amounts. So both with their 2 lenders as well as their own money, if those phase 1 costs, either for the project or for borrowing, were to increase from the current estimates. The TIF bonds, the CID bonds, really can't generate any more than they're going to generate, right? That's kind of a known quantity. We hope that the bonds will outperform what is estimated here, but if they don't, and if project costs increase for phase 1, the city won't, be looking at putting in money from some other source to complete the capital stack for phase 1. We can go on to the next slide. So this is some new information, and I know that others there at the meeting can elaborate on this. But one of the things that you may recall from when we met in small groups back in, I think it was late June, is that the idea that if we're going to issue bonds for phases 1 and 2, and to escrow the monies relating to phase 2, there was a strong sense that the city wanted a financial guarantee regarding the developers starting and completing that phase 2. To date, we haven't been able to reach agreement on that kind of a mechanism. And so we're currently contemplating, and really with a lot of details still to be figured out. So this isn't set in stone, and ultimately, of course, you as the governing body have the ultimate say on whether and how you would want to structure a development agreement. But the working plan right now is to really focus on the TIF and the CID plan updates, as have been on the table for some time now. A proposed special obligation TIF and CID bond issue that would be payable solely from those phase 1 elements. So strictly, to pay phase 1 costs and to be repaid from TIF and CID from the apartments, the retail, and synergy. And then to figure out what other milestones and or requirements that, are to be negotiated between the city and the developers regarding phase 1. So we're taking a more tightly focused at this point look at phase 1 and city participation relating to phase 1. And it's really important to note that this council cannot obligate a future council to issuing bonds for phase 2. So while we can set sort of a game plan in place as part of the development agreement, whenever the project is ready to go into phase 2, a future council, whether it's still this makeup or another makeup, would have to consider separately the issuance of bonds, to be repaid with phase 2 TIF and CID. So that's a new angle from what we were considering before.
Just to
But on my analysis, you've seen this, I think, also from the discussions we had a couple of months ago. But for folks that are maybe in the audience or new to this discussion, the Gateway and GFI groups provided very detailed budgets, funding projections, and operating performas for really the whole project, phases 1 and 2, and for the specific elements within each phase. And as you'll recall, with the proposed assistance of the split of the sales TIF between the city and the developer, the property TIF, the transient guest tax TIF, or transient guest taxes that would come from phase 2 and so on. Even with all of those revenue streams, the developer's projected rate of return would be really on the low end of market expectations. And so as I look at it and as I consulted with other colleagues, if you were to have another developer come into this type of situation, we really wouldn't necessarily expect them to pursue the project as currently proposed, given that very low rate of return. Now we know that the Gateway Group's circumstances are unique. They state that they're committed to getting this project done, both phases 1 and 2. And so they're willing to take that reduced rate of return, but we'll say that, with the proposed TIF and CID that's been on the table as a working concept, we don't see any circumstance in which they would be making an outsized profit from this project. And in addition, I would also note that given construction cost volatility and the interest rate environment, this may not be, they may even see somewhat higher costs in borrowing costs than what are in their current budgets and projections. So, as to the but-for, we feel like that's not really a question here. There is a need for assistance. It's a question of, what does the city council want to do about it in terms of its participation and the terms of its participation. So that's really where I would ask you to keep your focus, isn't so much on the need, but does this meet city criteria and objectives? And is this a good investment on the city's part?
Bruce,
to
I
that-
would pause if, I
Yeah.
think Councilmember Davis had a question for you on this slide.
Yes, thank you. Just refresh our minds with regards to the prior agreement. It was not done in a phase. Is that correct? It was proposed as a continuous project without phasing. Is that correct?
I can answer that one.
Yeah, please do.
It was amended. So the last amended version was one continuous phase. But the initial development agreement that was negotiated back in 2017 did anticipate a phased approach. And so it's been a variety of things, even through the iterations of the most recent development agreement.
Laura, just to clarify that on the 2017 version, it was 2 phases, but both phase 1 and phase 2 or the complete project were included in the one development agreement, right?
They were both included in one development agreement, and there were certain caps. So for example, when there were separate phases, there was a cap on the amount of incentives that would have been available for the phase 1 project.
And
Laura?
I would note that we could still have a single development agreement, but it's really key to note that this council could not, if we do take a split bonding approach, this council would not be able to, obligate a future council to issue those phase 2 bonds.
Hang on a second, Bruce. I think Hillary had a question.
Sure.
Thanks. Hi, Bruce. I am wondering, what's the timeline for phase 2? Do we have any indication of when phase 2 could come to be? And is there any financing secured for phase 2 at all, or is that just totally far down the line?
Well, I would like to let the developers speak to their current thinking about phase 2, because they have been working on it. It's not like they've just been kicking the can down the road. And I know that they do have discussions, or they have been having discussions about the lending for phase 2, but they don't have that to a level of specificity as they do with the phase 1 financing. So it's not, just hanging out there, but it's also not ready to, be executed on in the immediate future.
All right, I think we're good to continue your presentation, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you, Trent. Why don't we go to the last slide? One more forward. Great, thank you. So you'll recall also that I discussed some estimated city revenues that the city would collect during the proposed 20-year TIF term. And you may recall that with the TIF reset, there was an estimated $26 million. And actually, that's a fairly conservative estimate of what revenues the city would collect during that TIF term, even as the development is collecting a portion of the sales tax revenues and the property tax revenues. And I went back into that model and sort of broke it apart for phase 1 and phase 2. And this might be surprising, but the phase 1 city revenues are about 22 million of the total, and the phase 2 revenues are about 4 million of the total. Now, after the 20-year term, those proportions will change. And the reason why is, as you recall, the hotel is a pretty big driver of revenues, or a potential driver of revenues. And so you're getting 1% of the 9% transient guest tax during the TIF term. But after that expires, after bonds are paid off, and it might be before 2042, then there would be some ability, let's call it 2042. Then you would have the full transient guest tax coming to the city there from the phase 2 hotel. The office building isn't really a big factor either way. So it's really those, those retail uses with synergy and the retail, and then stormwater revenues. I guess I am assuming the stormwater assessment and revenues as part of the phase one for the entire project. I guess that's something that, we would need to spell out specifically in the development agreement. But you can see that the lion's share of those revenues will be either continued as in with the stormwater revenues, or generated anew with the sales taxes, especially with the phase one development. And I would also note this is, probably impossible really to quantify, or at least to agree on how to quantify it. But I know as it relates to some city objectives, phase one really would see that population, as well as retail and entertainment growth, the affordable apartment units, and sustainable building design and operations, as has been agreed to already by the development group. So this isn't in any way to say you should go ahead and improve this deal. I think you've got a lot of questions to ask and discussions to have. But I thought it was worth pointing out that a lot of those city goals or benefits would come from the phase one part of the project. Why don't I stop there and see, or Laura, why don't I turn it back to you and you can decide how best to proceed from here.
I had one question before I think we'll let Councilmember Boultinghouse take committee questions. Could you just remind us? So a couple of things. So the assumptions in the phase one and phase two revenues assume that we would renew the Parks and Recreation sales tax at the 3/8 cent rate that is currently out, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so it's 45% of the TIF general sales tax. A combination of a variety of things, but the largest drivers in those revenue streams would be 45% of the TIF general sales tax and the additional revenues for dedicated street sales tax and Parks and Recreation sales tax, which would not be committed and have not historically been committed to the project through the development agreement.
Correct. That's a great point. Yes, we are assuming the continuation of the special sales taxes that the city alone would collect.
And then could you also, I don't think I saw it on a previous slide, or I did and I missed it, but in total bond proceeds for the projection for bond proceeds for phase one and phase two, I think we talked about 22.5 million for phase one, and the balance in phase two would be roughly 9 million.
Correct. Well, let's call it 10. Yeah. And that number, of course, is subject to, market conditions when we and the underwriters go to actually sell those bonds.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna give everyone on the governing body a chance to speak first. I saw Ben's hand first.
Yeah, hi, Bruce. You mentioned the transient guest tax. I was just wondering if we have some idea how much would be generated from that during the TIF term.
Yeah, so let me pull that back up. I had that. 1 second. Of course, this is now the time where my computer is getting confused, but I do have that here. Okay, great. So city revenues, during the TIF term, we are assuming that the city would collect, it will grow over time according to our plans, but that you'd start out at roughly 61,000 of transient guest tax revenues and grow to about 100,000 of transient guest revenues. And then once the TIF burns off, your collections, from the hotel would grow to about 900,000 a year. So
Great, thank you.
it's quite a big jump.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Mayor Flora, then Ken.
Yeah, hi, Bruce. I had a question on what project completion timeline these revenue streams were tied to, or these revenue estimates. Was this based on the schedule we were presented in February, or an updated, schedule that's maybe moved back a bit?
Well, we shifted the dates back. So it's it's still the same pace as what was projected earlier this year, Mayor, but it is contemplating the new, TIF start, if you see fit to do that, and the development timeline from there. So, I feel like we are, as long as those timelines are still what especially for phase one, is what the developers think they can, accomplish, we should be fine, because we did change the years from the original model.
Okay, and then my other question was if you could give a reminder on special obligation bonds and how those protect the city as opposed to other bonds.
Great, thanks for that, Mayor. Yes, so special obligation bonds are secured only with the revenues that are pledged really per the terms of the development agreement. So that split of the sales tax revenues, the allocation of the property tax revenues, the split of the transient guest tax, although that would really only pertain to phase two bonds. All of that will be spelled out, of course, in the development agreement. And then that would also translate then to the bond structuring and the offering documents for those bonds, and ultimately the indenture of trust for those bonds as well, so that when you get down to paying debt service, it's absolutely clear that only this subset of revenues is going to the trustee to pay debt service on those pure revenue bonds, as we call them. Typically, the city issues general obligation bonds that may be backed with all sorts of different revenue sources, but ultimately pledge the city's full faith and credit taxing powers. And that's why you have such a stellar credit rating and get such great interest rates on the city's financings. That is totally not the case here. You're really only pledging those revenues, and so that's what the underwriter has to work with in terms of attracting investors to this bond issue. And that can't be changed. In the city, the city can't down the road be left holding the bag for those bonds. There's no legal obligation or exposure there.
Hi, Bruce. Two things. Number one, I'd like you to speak to the parking structure and how that fits into phase one. Is that assured to be completed? And then the second one has to do with the outstanding issues that you and staff have requested of the developer. What still remains unfurnished at this point in time?
Thank you for those questions. I'd like to defer the parking structure question to the development team, although it is the city team's understanding that they can't really phase that, right? And it's necessary for the apartments, the retail, and synergy. So it's my understanding, including from their numbers, that will be complete. That component will be completed in full as part of phase one. As to what's left to be provided, after looking at the bank financing term sheets, I do have some follow-up questions. I'd like to have the opportunity to talk further with the development team and with the bankers, ideally, about how that piece of the financing package is coming along. Similar with DA Davidson, I think it's appropriate for me to start being more actively engaged in those conversations at this point as well. Again, if the city is moving along that track. But that's not an absence of, I guess, information at this point. It's just what I'm seeing as the next necessary steps, so that when we get to the point of final consideration and a vote, I can represent to you that we've obtained this much more information about the funding stack and about different components of the project, and I can say, with more certainty, even, that I feel like they've demonstrated that they are ready to go or not. If there are any gaps or things still to be completed, I will be the first to point those out. But I think that's a lot of the work ahead for me, council member, is working on further refining and making sure all the pieces of the financing plan hold together.
Thank you.
Anyone else have comments for Bruce? Yeah, Debbie.
Hi, Bruce. It's my understanding that although the developer's here this evening, that he will not be doing a presentation. He'll defer until over the next 2 weeks. Will your questions be answered in a different format through a written memo, or how will your questions be answered? Because a couple times you've referenced that, well, I'll let the developer answer that. Is that to be continued, or is that something that he's going to get back with you on?
I'll take that one. And we asked the developer tonight not to make their formal presentation on the overall, sort of project deal points in their request, but they are certainly available to answer questions. So if there is some that they could answer this evening, either posed by you or Mr. Kimmel, we can certainly invite them to comment this evening. Bruce, I did have one question if I could.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman. Just kind of looking at as a percentage, as we look at potentially a $32 million special obligation bond issuance for phase 1 and phase 2 as a proportion or as a percentage of the overall project. If my math is correct, I think that overall participation in the deal would be in the neighborhood of about 12%. And I'm guessing you're
Right. Yep.
okay. So I think it's about 13% of phase 1 improvements and slightly lower on phase 2. But overall, one of the things that we've talked about over the course of time is just sort of what is that balance of incentives as a percentage of the overall project budget. So just point that out because I know it has been part of conversations in the past, and I believe that has decreased over time.
It has, yeah. And Mr. Chair, if I can just elaborate on that a little more. Again, I think it's a consideration, but you have a whole host of other ones as well. But, if you want to make sure that the city's financial participation is, limited, I would point out that Laura's calculation is correct. It's a little over 12% of the total estimate. If the project costs increase, that percentage will go down. And on a mixed use, large scale, expensive project like this, it wouldn't be uncommon to see TIF and CID funding more like 25% of the overall project costs. So this is, half that. Now, of course, we all know that the developer has sunk costs into this project, has incurred certain costs, that it can't recoup, or it can only hope to recoup really from ongoing cash flows. And that's what's really driving their return on investment towards the lower end of viability. So I think that's worth pointing out. And if that is meaningful, to any or all of you, I can certainly provide more detail on that at next week's session. And it is my hope to be in person with you at next week's work session as well.
Thank you, Bruce. Any other members of the governing body have any comments? All right, I think we're good from a council perspective. Thank you, Bruce.
Welcome.
Right, is there any member of the public who has a question or comments on this particular item? Yeah, please come to the order in which you appear and sign up on the sheet or state your name. Please remember there are 3 minutes as a speaker.
Thank you. My name is John Anderson. I live in Prairie Village. And in spite of that, Laura's nice enough to let me in. I did want to talk about Gateway just for a second, but not the project itself. Maggie and I intended to come to your meeting last time and we were late, but as we walked through the parking lot, we ran into a couple of folks and we started talking about Gateway, and it turns out that it was Hillary and Ben. We were out there for 30 minutes, and it turns out that I have been a friend of Tom's for 20 years. I have, in my past life, been very involved in the development business. In my experience, the projects that are the most successful are the ones where the developer is the highest of character. We talked about this a little bit and they said, well, why don't you come and talk about that? Because all you guys hear are all these numbers and the architects and the leasing agreements and the financing, and God, they're all important as heck. But I think it's also important to have a sense for who you're dealing with. And unfortunately, since that started, there's been a couple of mayors and several different city council members, and some of you may or may not know Tom very well. I have no stake in the project, by the way, but he is a man of faith, a family man, an honest man, a good man. So I know the numbers have to work, but just be alert to the fact that you're dealing with a really quality guy. And no matter what happens in the future, it would be very difficult to find somebody of the quality of Tom that you could deal with and trust. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else in the public who would like to make any public comments this evening on this agenda item? Anything online, Emily? All right. Ms. Smith, could you please share with the committee and public the next meeting opportunity on the Gateway project and sort of the general timeline there?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Boultinghouse. So we will be meeting in a work session next Wednesday evening at 6:30 p.m. At that time, we will have some additional information from Mr. Kimmel. I will have the rest of our city's team here, and the developer and their team will be making a formal presentation. So if there are, if there's anything that you heard this evening or you have that you didn't hear this evening that you would like to make sure that we cover next week in that work session, please feel free to email me or call me. Let me know what that is, and we'll make sure we have that available for you. And then we will be meeting again in a special city council meeting on Wednesday, September 28th at 6:30 p.m. For the purpose of holding the public hearings on the recently submitted to Free Development Project Plan and the Community Improvement District petition, as well as then considering ordinances. And we'll share those ordinances next week as well and preview those. We felt it was premature this evening. Even though those will be action items on the 28th, we want to make sure that we have the opportunity to revisit sort of the financial foundation of the deal and the pro forma. But we will certainly be in a position to review those in more detail next week. So happy to answer any other questions, but that's the schedule. The project status section of the website related to the Gateway project has been updated, includes that calendar and is reflective of that. And we have been communicating with, it also encourages anyone who wants to follow along and be notified of any upcoming meetings related to the Gateway, that there's a sign up opportunity. We have roughly 10 individuals who are a part of that list currently. And so we've been sending notices for all the meetings that we've had to date, including this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Laura. And I believe we already covered department updates earlier.
Yeah, I think
the first one was, or
Oh,
the
go ahead.
first one was timing of phase two. As Bruce mentioned, we don't have imminent financing on it for the hotel and the office. Obviously, the hospitality industry is still kind of coming out of the pandemic, but it's definitely starting to loosen up. So, it's our belief that, within 24 months of starting of phase one, we would probably have, financing in place for phase two. That being said, we have phase one, term sheets now and ready to go. I think the second question was the parking deck. Yes, the whole parking deck is part of phase one. You wouldn't have enough parking for everything you're building, and you don't want to come back and build it all. And actually, almost 100% of the parking deck is already fabricated. It's just going to be erected, which is going to go really quick once we start.
Yeah, Ken? And then Debbie?
Can you also speak to the structures that are out there now in terms of their engineering and ability to go ahead and move forward without having to redo existing structures?
Yeah, we did have some engineers and architects already go out and look at the existing structures as they have before. There will have to be a plan for them to actually go back out there again right before we start to make sure that, you know, existing rebar is good. But, you know, typically the synergy structure is in really good shape. The parking deck is in good shape. The piers that are part of the small shop residential buildings along Roland and Johnson, they have some existing exposed rebar. Typically that's sandblasted off. They take, you know, measurements of diameter and go from there. So they'll wait till they're really ready to start before they actually perform those. So otherwise you'd be doing it again anyway.
Thank you.
Yep.
And before we move on, if I might, just one thing. So we have confirmed with the developer, the franchise agreement with the hotel. So we know that is in place. That is information that they have provided to us. And as well, the kind of the assessment of that structural integrity was something that the council had requested several months ago. And so the developer has accommodated that. And we wanted to make sure that we were accounting for any potential costs as we move forward in evaluating the project budget. So both of those things were requested by the council and have been provided by the developer.
The synergy component will include sit-down restaurants or not?
Synergy, yeah, they're a tenant, so they can kind of do what they want within their own box. But the typical Synergy Entertainment Center has dine-in theaters, sit-down restaurants, and some other, you know, entertainment type of things. And they switch out things quite often within that, they used to have laser tag. They don't have laser tag anymore. So they'll kind of switch out the concepts as time goes.
All right, thank you.
Mayor, did you have a comment too?
Nope, I was just going to make sure the parking structure question was still on the list, but Matt was on it.
And again, in response to the synergy question, one of the other things the council had asked for is just confirmation that synergy was still a part of the project and a part of the deal. And we have received a letter from their representatives indicating that and their support for the use of the incentives.
All right. Anybody else have any comments for the development team? Yeah, Debbie.
I just have one piece. I've been on this since the
I know.
very beginning with your dad, and I'm waiting for your son to now come into this. Hopefully not. I just want you to look us in the eye and tell me you can build this.
Oh, we can absolutely
Waited
build
for-
it.
This is my 23rd year. We started this and we went to Guam and looked at the aquarium. We've looked at several phases and iterations. And I am still a total optimist, but I want you to look at me and tell me you can do this.
We can do this. We are ready to go.
All right. I think that takes care of this item. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So with no other updates, I think that concludes this evening's Finance and Administration Committee. It is now 7:35 and I will turn it over to Chairman Chosi.
Thank you. Does anyone want a quick break? Are you ready to go? Let's take 5 minutes.
Ken.
Oh, yeah. Are we recording? Okay. Glad I had my mic off. Okay. All right, let's get started. It is 7:42 PM, and I'd like to call this meeting of the Community Development Committee to order. While this meeting is being held in person, in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. Public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you're participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the lectern to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and city of residence for the record. Also be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concerns. Ms. Folks, will you please call the roll?
Josie,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Thomas,
Here.
Boultinghouse.
Here.
Loudon.
Here.
Ryard.
Here.
Kring.
Here.
Inman.
Here.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed with our agenda. The first item of business is public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment now on an item not listed on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, we'll now proceed with our regular agenda. First, tonight, we have a presentation on approval of a preliminary development plan for a 307-unit multifamily development on the property located at 5665 Fox Ridge Drive from Brian Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As you stated, this is a preliminary development plan for 307-unit multifamily development project. It's located at 5665 Fox Ridge Drive. This is the old JCPenney call center on the east side of town. This item was heard by the Planning Commission at a public hearing at their July 25th meeting. At that time, the Planning Commission took testimony from the public. There was only one comment from a resident kind of concerning more about apartment development in general in the city, not particularly about this particular project. After that, the Planning Commission, upon due consideration, voted 9-0 to recommend approval of the preliminary development plan to the City Council. So this will be on your September 21st meeting. There's not really a whole lot to say about it. You'll hear it all the September 21st meeting. I think one component is that this is in the form-based code overlay district, which is on the west side of town. And there's some information in the staff packet about the form-based code overlay district and how staff evaluated that in reviewing this project, and a couple of deviations that were recommended from that form-based code. In particular, form-based code requires that the building be oriented towards Broadmoor. Broadmoor is kind of defined as being the urban corridor, the urban street in the form-based code overlay district, that plan. The developer was very insistent having the building oriented towards Metcalf. We wanted to have that presence from Metcalf and that visibility. We negotiated with the developer to try to have some sense of activity along Broadmoor. The developer placed a maker space along the frontage of Broadmoor, that back part of the building, as well as a bicyclery kind of storage area. Those areas are transparent, so one can see what's going on inside that space, feel a sense of eyes on the road and some sense of connection and activity. That kind of plays into the second deviation with high-rise buildings. Ground floor retail is a requirement of buildings in form-based code. And again, the developer was not interested in providing ground floor retail. He felt that was too far away from Johnson Drive. There wouldn't be enough activity coming up to Johnson Drive to really provide a sense of business for retail in that area. So again, having that activity along Broadmoor to kind of create that sense of activity was the kind of where we landed in terms of negotiations and that point. So anyway, we'll describe all that in more detail on the 21st when that's before you.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Any questions or comments from the committee on the preliminary development plan piece? Councilmember Boultinghouse and then, okay.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I believe I read in the packet where they are going to pursue lead certification, which I remember was not originally on the table there. Could you just confirm that and kind of, yeah, just confirm that for me, I guess.
They went to the Sustainability Commission with a scorecard that said that they were pursuing lead certification. I don't know they're actually going to do that. I think that's kind of tied with the incentive, and they haven't decided yet whether they're going to ask for an incentive as part of this project. So I can't confirm if they're going to do lead certification. That's probably a question for the developer when he's here on the 21st.
Thanks.
Councilmember Davis.
Hi, Brian. It seems like we always come up against this form-based code issue and deviations from it. At what point are we going to take a hard look at that and whether or not we're continuing to try to fit a round peg in a square hole?
Right.
Because it seems to me that we always end up with individuals coming to deviate from the form-based code. And it drives me nuts that we have a plan and an idea of what we want, but never are any of the developers wanting to conform with that.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, trying to fit a round peg into a square hole. And that form-based code is very prescriptive. It shall be this, it shall be that. And what the form-based code is asking for is not necessarily what the market is willing to provide to us. So there's certain market demands that a developer's trying to satisfy, and those two are not always congruent. I think to kind of answer your picture in a larger level, we're in the process of updating our comprehensive land use plan. We just got another draft back from the consultants a week or two ago, and we're reading through that now. It's our intent to bring that back to you in the fall, probably in a joint meeting with the city council and the planning commission, kind of get reintroduced to that, get our heads wrapped around that again. But one of the recommendations is to reevaluate that form-based code. And so I see that kind of being a project down the road, probably in 23, maybe 24. And we could kind of work the, the city administrator talked about funding in the budget for 2023 for updating our zoning code. And that would be kind of a nice segue as we go through that process of reevaluating that form-based code and seeing if there are opportunities where we can kind of tweak it so it's a little bit more flexible and we don't feel like we're trying to cram something in.
I appreciate that. I don't know if other cities have a form-based code area such as ours, but it just seems that while we have aspired to do this, it seems that the reality is that the projects that come forward, just they try to do their best to fit, but it doesn't fit really with what they want, and so we end up with all these deviations.
Overland Park is the only other city that I know of in the Kansas City metro area that has a form-based code. I think they modeled it after ours. I think they've struggled with it as well.
Councilmember Kring.
Since the form-based code does require a first floor, another type of entity, have they asked for a waiver? Or I would see 307 units, that's potentially 600 to 900 people. A coffee shop that they don't have to drive all the way to Johnson Drive seems like a really good idea for that area.
And the developer is going to tell you 300 residents living in that building will not support a coffee shop. Believe it or not.
307 units, that means there's at least 307 people. If
Right.
not
Probably more like
double or-
500 residents, but that will not be enough to support a coffee shop at the ground floor.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so have they asked for a waiver?
Yeah.
And
So-
who granted it?
Yeah. So that was part of the recommendation that staff made to the planning commission, was to give a deviation on that.
Okay.
And kind of in lieu of that retail or commercial space on the ground floor were these spaces that the developer would provide that are part of the building, the amenities. They call it maker space. And it's a space where if somebody has a piece of furniture from IKEA that they purchased and they want to assemble it, they can work in the space to assemble it or wrap Christmas presents or whatever the case may be. Then there's a bicyclery, which is a storage area and a repair shop for bicycles for the residents. I think there might be one other amenity. Those are all located along the ground floor level at Broadmoor and a little bit as it wraps around 56th Street. And those, like I said earlier, those spaces are with transparent glass. You can see activities occurring inside, and it creates that sense of connection with the building and those outside and the sidewalk walking by. So, my hope would be this would be a catalyst for that particular area of the form-based code, because it's kind of the north end of that Westgate district. And there might be some other activity that sort of fills in the teeth, if you will. I could see something happening in that parking lot just to the south between the Mission Tower office building in a few years. And maybe that's an opportunity for some retail. You start to create kind of a corridor of retail activity up Broadmoor, then maybe at some future date, the developer would reconsider and put some retail in. But at this time, they're not interested in doing that.
Okay, Councilmember Inman.
I had a question regarding traffic studies. That's still part of this discussion.
Mhm.
So there was a meeting that happened with KDOT, and it was determined that they were not going to put in a traffic signal there. But have they agreed to extend the, the right turn lane going north? There was a recommendation to extend that.
Right.
That merging, that's kind of a disaster. And then, of course, there was a recommendation then on the southbound, taking a left-hand turn on 56. Have they agreed to go ahead and do those modifications? And if so, when would those be completed? Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, that's another challenge with this project. Again, they're not asking for incentives, so they haven't agreed to actually make the improvements that were recommended in that traffic study. And it'd be my opinion as staff that if they do request incentives, that be considered as part of the incentive package, so that they make those improvements on the KDOT right away. But yes, we did a traffic study. We had several iterations. And one of the recommendations early on was to provide a signalization there, 56 and Metcalf. KDOT did not agree to that, but they did agree to some recommendations to basically extend or create and extend an acceleration lane northbound of Metcalf. So when one makes that right turn from 56th Street onto Metcalf going north, there's an opportunity to accelerate and kind of merge over into the rest of the traffic. Then likewise, northbound, making a right turn into 56th Street, creating a deceleration lane, allowing for one to kind of pull over, slow down to make that right turn.
Just for clarification, so KDOT did agree to that,
Yeah.
and they will do that.
KDOT agreed to those improvements. Who's going to pay for them is the question. That's what's up in the air right now.
Okay, all right, thanks for that
Yeah.
clarification.
Okay, I've got Councilmember Thomas and Ms. Smith and Councilmember Davis.
Thank you. Couple comments. Number one, follow up on Kristen's. I just want to highlight in the traffic study, there's 16 accidents, some fatal between 2017 and 2022 at that intersection. And so regardless of whether that's part of the incentives, if they ask for incentives or what KDOT will pay for, I think we as a city need to figure out how to prioritize doing something at that intersection as quickly as possible. That's first. Second, agree with Ken on form-based code, nothing else to add. I'm curious, how long is this preliminary development plan good for?
5 years.
5 years. Is that standard for us?
Mhm.
Okay. And then just follow-up question in terms of process, just as a reminder, what comes after this? And I ask because a little bit of this process feels somewhat out of order, not in terms of, our votes per se, but in relation to Sustainability Commission, in that the Sustainability Commission had a really good experience with the developer and was excited about a high scorecard. And the idea that the developer, not that it's ever locked in until we sign things, but the idea that incentives will no longer be on the table and those sustainability initiatives may not happen. And, the Sustainability Commission is already excited about this project, is somewhat concerning. So it makes me think that maybe in the future, we could think about doing, those presentations to sustainability after we, agree upon something or maybe a little bit closer towards the finalization. So I'll let you elaborate, but it's just questions on process there.
Yeah, I think, frankly, as staff, we've struggled. Where in the process do we fit in the Sustainability Commission? And traditionally, it's always been preliminary development plan, then go to the Sustainability Commission, then the final development plan. We've been kind of moving the Sustainability Commission plan a little bit closer to the preliminary development plan. Sometimes we try to get them in front of the preliminary development plan a little bit so that we can present that information to the Planning Commission, so that can be part of their consideration. But it does kind of feel like, what do you put first, the chicken or the egg? So I think we're still struggling a little bit with that. I will say, I think, I'll leave it at that. So anyway, yeah, we're still kind of working through that relationship and that process. Did you have another question? I kind of lost track there. Okay.
If nothing else, I wonder if it'd be, an efficient use of the Sustainability Commission's time to at least ask the developer to say, like, this is potentially, dependent on incentives and financing, and we may come back to you with another option that looks like this, and not have to, go through the whole sustainability thing twice. Just get everybody up front at the beginning would be nice for, I think, everyone, but I don't know how feasible that is all the time. I'll get you.
I can wait until everybody else is done.
Councilmember Davis.
I want to echo the concerns about the traffic situation. I don't know that we have jurisdiction because it's KDOT's jurisdiction. I don't know what kind of authority we have to push KDOT to install a light there, and I don't think we could do it ourselves. So that's one point that I'd like to make. On the issue of the architecture that has been presented, theoretically, even though they're not doing any kind of retail in that first level, that could come back and be revised in the future. Is that correct?
I would think so. I mean, I don't think there's anything prohibiting the future improvements to that building that would allow for retail space. Obviously, it's going to require some design and some re-engineering, but I mean, I think that's doable. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it might be a more effective use of the form-based code, since nobody wants to be the first mover on a space like that, to have retail out in the middle of nowhere. If we shift more towards like street activation instead of specifically retail, it gives us opportunity down the road to rethink what the use is. But yeah, I could see why we aspire high, but then you're not going to be the first person at 56 and Fox Ridge to plop a bunch of restaurants down. So, Mayor.
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to jump in on the sustainability piece. And I know we had in the packet the sustainability scorecard. So maybe that's something that staff could ask the developer to be ready to clarify on when they present, is which components on that scorecard they would plan to move forward with incentives, or which they would drop if there were not incentives involved in the project.
And Ms. Smith. Go ahead.
I would just say one of two things with KDOT. We could look at potential grant opportunities for a light placement, but it's a really good timing with the Kansas League coming up in the National League of Cities to work with the legislators, because that's a safety issue and it goes outside the realm of just Mission. That's a major highway that goes through there. I mean, there's some things that the legislators could take forth.
Yeah, I'd echo that.
I just wanted to follow up and Councilmember Davis, I recognize it's not our jurisdiction, but there are multiple proposals, listed there, and it's just a matter of funding. And I'm sure KDOT would be willing to work with us if we would allow for some funding.
I also think that there's that entire stretch from Panera all the way to 56th Street that's a problem, because it's a problem accessing at the Panera stop sign. It's difficult to access off of, what is it? Well, it's off Broadmoor, yeah. And then 56th Street. So all three of those entrances onto Metcalf are real problematic for anybody is trying to get on.
Thanks. Thanks, Ben. I agree, and I'm excited that in the comp plan, I think, have that stretch of coming down to grade. Am I correct on that? Looking at Metcalf coming down to grade, is that what we originally had?
Possible recommendation.
Possible, right? I think that would change a lot of the dynamic in terms of entry into the city and slowing down Metcalf in general.
I would just reiterate, we are just approving apartments in the number of over 800 new apartment apartment units. That is adding an additional amount of people to the traffic flow. So as we're doing all this planning and we're looking, the traffic study is real important to me, for one. But looking at how many people are entering and exiting the city is going to make a big difference in terms of how we are governing our traffic patterns and how many people are out there on the street. Johnson Drive especially. You start adding that many people to Johnson Drive, if you think that's not an impact, we're in trouble.
Anyone else?
Okay, just a couple of things that I wanted to touch on, because I share and appreciate the frustration with deviations with the form-based code, but it's also a good reminder as I go through these processes that we've gone too long without reevaluating the work that was done in the West Gateway visioning process. So if you take that step back and you say the West Gateway vision plan estimated 11,000 multifamily units and 150 some odd thousand square feet of retail as a part of that plan. But that was put in place back in, 2007, 2008. And if we think about the comment that Mr. Scott just made about, we have codes that aren't responsive to what the market is bringing us, that results in deviations. And that results in deviations in both the form-based code and MS1, MS2, and our regular zoning districts. And so I as we look at it, and I think our staff does a good job of saying, okay, what is that intent, right? And can we meet that intent, and can we align with what the market is bringing us and still not lose sight of? So when I think about form-based code, I think if we can't support the retail, and that's been a challenge for us, then what makes sense? And that is keeping that Broadmoor side activated. That means getting people used to coming out of that side of the building and coming down and potentially walking down to Johnson Drive or having other infill development that comes along. So I think, having our codes catch up, but remembering that we won't be able to update them probably as frequently as the market is going to shift and change for us. So finding that balance between where can we be comfortable with the deviation? And so part of the form-based code also is, it was intended to streamline the process. Here's our vision developer. If you're willing to build to this vision, then you don't have to go through a two-step process. You have a fast track to get your plan approved. It hasn't panned out that way. But I think there are absolutely certain pieces of that as we go through these zoning code updates that we'll want to, keep and think about. But then I think we need to be committed to updating comp plans, updating zoning codes more frequently than what we have done in the last 10 plus years.
Okay, any other questions or comments? All right, next we have a presentation on the approval of the preliminary plat for the same 5665 Fox Ridge. Brian, do you have any more?
Same song, different
Yeah.
verse. So, it's just pretty straightforward. It's just a preliminary plat. As we've been going through this process this summer, we've noticed that a lot of the property in Mission, especially in our commercial areas, is not platted. So we're just asking developers to plat. In this case, there's no dedication of right of way that already exists. The plat would just simply identify some easements and some things like that. So it's a pretty straightforward process.
Okay. And no comments on the plat, I take it. Finally, we have a presentation on the approval of the preliminary and final plat for Holly Heights, which is the 58 and all project. Again, from Brian Scott.
Yeah. So this is the 58th and all development project that was approved by the city council earlier this summer. 77 unit apartment complex at the south west corner of 58th Street and Knoll Avenue. In this case, the developer is purchasing 4 individual parcels So we're asking him to combine those into one parcel in the plat. And in this particular case, there actually is a dedication of right of way. We missed that last time. We were kind of looking at the plat again, a little bit closer detail during a meeting. We were, what's that little thing right there? Oh, sure enough, a little dedication of a sidewalk. So he's taking that sidewalk up along Knoll and connecting it to a sidewalk at 58th Street. And a little bit of that's kind of crossing over into his property line. And so he's going to dedicate a sidewalk easement to us for that. And so that will be a part of the final plat that you'll have to accept, that dedication of easement. And so both those plats will be on your September 21st meeting.
Questions on the plat?
This isn't really in regards to the plat, but that building, do you know when the buildings are gonna come down?
No, I don't.
Okay. This is kind of a code violation. I walked by there and that house that used to be part of Script Pro, it's the one most south. It has 4 feet of weeds in it.
Okay.
And I'm concerned about that. I mean, it originally started out like an English ivy type of. And it's gone El Natural.
I know that he's closed on the property. He now owns it, so I'll ask him to mow it and kind of get it cleaned up a little bit.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Any other comments for 58? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Moving on to our action items. Our first action item this evening is the acceptance of the meeting minutes with Ms. Foltz.
Thank you. The meeting minutes from the August 3rd Community Development Committee were included in the packet for your review and acceptance.
Any recommendations?
Recommend acceptance and move to consent.
Okay, consent. The second action item is a consideration of a joint use agreement with KDOT for Streamway Park with Penn Omni.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So on March 25th, 1987, Mission entered into an agreement with KDOT for the right-of-way use of Streamway Park. And over the last 35 years, we've been really good tenants of that agreement. And over the last 3 years specifically, we've rekindled discussions about conceptual redesigns of Streamway Park and easements, water improvements, things along those lines. And they've been grateful for how well we've taken care of their plot. When it came time for the conceptual redesign of Streamway Park, the preferred location for Mission's dog park, all they wanted to do was see the conceptual redesigns and make sure that they accommodated their needs and met with the agreement. So I shared those with them, and KDOT Metro engineer came back and he said that they supported and they will secure approval from the Federal Highway Administration, including those conceptual dog park renovations. So they only had 2 caveats as part of that support. The first one was to make sure that it's within the same configuration of the existing agreement. The second one was to make sure that any park shelters that are permanent in nature would get removed if and when the agreement stopped. And so the proposed supplemental agreement, which we're discussing today, is in place because the dog park proposes a semi-permanent element to the park. And they just want to make sure that it's in writing that we agree that should they take over use of that park, that we're okay removing all those elements. This agreement was reviewed with Payne and Jones, and they find that the following characteristics are reasonable as well as us. First one is sharing improvement plans and design revisions, updates as appropriate. And we're certainly willing to do that. Second one is quality workmanship, no change of use in the park programming, and then no hunting, which we're okay with. We're okay removing any permanent structures since that's a part of the original agreement within a reasonable time period, which is very nice. And then making sure that we've got adequate insurance coverage. And so staff is recommending approval of the supplemental joint use agreement between KDOT and the city of Mission. I'm happy to accept or answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Councilmember Davis.
No questions, just comment. It's kind of nice to see Susie Gibbs as the city clerk and Sylvester Powell as the mayor 35 years ago, and it's still in effect. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, you bet. I'm happy to say I know one of those people.
Thanks, Ben. So one of the questions I had, just to confirm, KDOT has not, it looked like in the packet, this was the case, but they have not expressed any concerns or potential for reusing that site at any point, correct?
Correct.
We don't
Yeah,
anticipate
he did say that he doesn't foresee the future. Can't tell what projects may be on horizon, but there have been no projects proposed in the short and near term.
Any other questions? Okay, recommendation.
Recommend that we take this to council. I don't know, non-consent, just to signal that we're doing the dog park.
Okay, regular agenda, please. And Mr. Ullman also has our third action item this evening, which is a consideration of a task order with George Butler Associates Incorporated for site surveying, design, and trail construction services at Broadmoor Park.
Thank you. So speaking of conceptual redesigns, this Broadmoor Park has been a hot button discussion item for a lot of residents, for all of us, and we've reviewed conceptual redesigns for the last couple of years. We've done that through neighborhood meetings, a couple citywide meetings, obviously stakeholder meetings, PRT, and then here in council. Throughout each one of those meetings, we've gotten feedback either from you all, anecdotally residents, or one-on-one as they're speaking to me about the need for us to replace the surface at Broadmoor Park. It was also included in the 2015 Parks and Recreation Master Plan that we needed to devote a lot of attention in the future to improving our trail system. And then most recently in April 2022, the Parks, Recreation and Tree Commission completed four goals that they proposed to council to consider for the year. And number one goal on that list was the PRT recommends the city address the deteriorating trail infrastructure in our parks with an emphasis on Broadmoor Park and Waterworks Park specifically. So that trail system's roughly 3/10 of a mile. It's about 6 feet wide, spans most of the perimeter of Broadmoor Park, gets a lot of use from picnickers, dog walkers, families, friends. We're happy to host all of those activities. We just want to look out for their well-being. So staff reached out to GBA and Olson, who are the on-site engineers for the city of Mission, and requested proposals for design and construction services for the trail. Olson unfortunately was not able to fit us in within their schedule. And so staff is recommending the approval of a task order from George Butler and Associates for preparation of trail improvement plan at Broadmoor Park in an amount not to exceed $32,000. It's important to remember that this trail design is included in the 2022 Parks and Recreation CIP, with construction funding being recommended in the 2023 capital improvement plan. And those would be paid for with existing Parks and Recreation sales tax dollars. Happy to take any questions.
Any discussion? Councilmember Kring.
Okay, this deals specifically with just the trail, nothing like the wetlands area that people don't like that either.
Correct.
Some of the landscaping where you took me for the walk and I broke my ankle. I mean, are we going to get to any of that at some point, or are we just focused right now on the trail?
So they're doing a site survey and design for the perimeter trail specifically. I'm sure that would entail, minimizing the slope in certain locations to meet ADA specifications. So some of that trail design would obviously affect other areas of the park, but I would think that's within 10 to 15 feet at the most.
So I would just add there that the rest of the improvements to the park are going to be determined pending the outcome of the sales tax renewal.
Okay.
So our hope had been really with the improvements to Mohawk, with the redo of the tennis courts at Anderson, with advancing the dog park at Streamway, and then redoing this trail, that leaves Waterworks as the one park we haven't been able to touch within the existing sort of Parks and Recreation revenues. But we also know that the council has indicated an interest of really, that project and Waterworks in its entirety being kicked off and done in conjunction with the Rushton rebuild. So our hope has been to demonstrate that commitment publicly, that we're investing in all of the outdoor parks and really showing that as a priority at this point.
Do we have an idea percentage wise of, for purposes of use of each park, which parks get the most use?
When it comes to trail walkers,
When it comes to birthday parties or picnics or events or people walking their dog? I mean, it's hard to come up. That's a culmination of things, I know.
yeah, when it comes to city events, Broadmoor Park is first. When it comes to rentals, Anderson Park is first. And obviously the proximity to the water park throughout the summer, that kind of drives rentals, and the new tennis court obviously helps out as well. But those are the top two.
Any other discussion, or is there, Inman?
So I'm really excited about this trail, but the 32,000 is just the design, is that correct? It does not include construction of the trail itself, is that right?
Correct. Yeah, there's the construction's in 2023, correct. You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Or a recommendation?
I think putting this on non-consent might be a good idea to highlight the work we're doing.
Yeah, I think the timing would be great for that regular agenda. Sounds good. Okay,
I recommend we take this to council, non-consent.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Penn. The fourth item is consideration of a pavement marking project with Heartland for markings on Johnson Drive, Martway, and Barclay Streets with Celia Duran. Hi.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We have about $70,000 in the budget this year for pavement markings, and we've spent some time meeting with other cities and doing research and meeting with manufacturers in general about pavement markings. In the past, we've used thermoplastic on our new streets such as Lamar. We just put it down on Johnson Drive. It's a very durable pavement marking, but the one issue is that the snow plows, when they drive over it, they tear it up. So we're always looking for new products. In fact, there's another product that's a little more expensive that I may be looking at for our next project. But right now, we have a number of streets that have no pavement markings in place. And so based on the traffic count, based on citizen complaints, based on the condition of the pavement markings, we performed a site inspection just to see, what we could do this year. So basically looked at Johnson Drive from Lamar to Metcalf, even though that project will be done in 2026, there's some areas where it's just gone. So that's a long time to wait. And I've received some complaints, primarily west of Broadmoor is where it's really bad, but the street's just rough in general. So I think that doesn't help us not to have the pavement markings. So that was one of the projects that we thought was really important to get done. Also looked at Martway. It started with complaints from Broadmoor to Metcalf. Those pavement markings are gone. And because that's kind of a high traffic intersection coming onto Metcalf, we wanted to look at going ahead and looking at the whole Woodson to Metcalf section, just because that was a CARS project before. So let's go ahead, and that's not in the 10-year CARS plan or anything. So we looked at that. And then Barclay, if you haven't driven it lately, I don't normally go on that street, but from Johnson Drive to Broadmoor, I guess what happened is it was restriped from turn lanes, 2 lanes with turn lanes to a 3-lane section when it was a chip seal, and the old pavement markings have bled through. So it's really confusing. It doesn't carry a lot of traffic, but if you drive it, you just are like, what is this? So anyway, meeting and talking about pavement markings. What can we do if we don't have a project? What's the best pavement marking? You could paint it every year. It's a lot cheaper, but you're going to have to be out there every year. So with the traffic, the manufacturers and some of the cities have recommended MMA, which is methyl methacrylate. And so that is a recommendation for either concrete, which we're putting in the parking stalls, and for old pavement. And one good thing about the MMA is the manufacturer is willing to come out on site and test and inspect, so we can kind of use it as a pilot to see how it works and wears over the winter. So I got, sorry. We obtained we went out for bidding and we received 2 bids, and they were well over what we anticipated. So we contacted the low bidder, Heartland Traffic Services, and asked, what could we do for that budget? And they came back with a price of $62,500 for doing all of Johnson Drive from Lamar to Metcalf, MARTWAY, just that section between Broadmoor and Metcalf, and then the Barkley section. So the work would be completed ideally by the end of October, but they're really busy this time of year. But we want to see how it wears over the winter, and then we can develop a program for next year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Councilmember Thomas.
I bet I'm just jumping the gun on Debbie here about her crosswalk. That was going to be my question, is if you guys had a conversation about getting a crosswalk where Debbie's been talking about it. Was that what you were going to ask about?
No, she's on it.
Okay, cool.
I'm totally convinced that everything will work out because I have total faith in this woman.
Uh-oh. You're setting me up for failure.
I just want to commend Celia and her staff for doing things. Not only do they get things done, they respond back quickly, and it's just a pleasure to work with you and your staff.
Thank
Doing
you.
a great job. Thank you.
Mayor.
Yeah, I have one kind of weird question and a note of caution that I read this on social media. I follow some streets and blogs and things like that. And I think I saw something about new real reflectivity standards with striping that might have gone into effect this week. So does this project, is that right? Or was it just on the internet? And two, does this account for that?
So they've changed the MUTCD requirements where you are required now, kind of like what they did with the signs or the stop signs, you have to have so much reflectivity. And so they started saying, okay, now cities, municipalities, you have to put pavement markings down, and the minute they're gone, you have to put them back so that you achieve a certain standard. So that's a big thing, because in the past, cities try to keep up with it, but there can be some faded ones. So we really need to get into that to see how that really impacts us. But it's going to mean that we're going to have to do a lot more job and invest a lot more in our pavement markings, which we should anyway. It's just a matter of prioritizing all of our needs.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Davis,
Recommend we take this to consent.
everyone okay with that? Could I ask, could you comment on Roland Drive, from Shawnee Mission Parkway to Johnson Drive? That's pretty, completely gone really in terms of markings, but is that on the CARS plan, or is that something that we?
It is on the CARS plan, but it's well into the future. So I think we need to see how
Yeah.
Gateway plays out.
Yeah.
And if we want to do something with that earlier.
Yeah, that's just an area that concerns me with the speed and some of the curves that people
Yes,
don't take caution on.
yes.
Okay. So we have consent for that. Okay, and our fifth item tonight is consideration of a task order with Olson to prepare a preliminary project study of the Rock Creek Channel to address flooding, water quality, and stream erosion.
So I know you've heard me talk about the watershed master plan from Johnson County, and it's finally been completed in March of 2022. And it used to be that cities just submitted stormwater projects separately, and the county came back and said, we need to look at an overall watershed based approach instead of just looking at this individual project that can impact other cities. So they've changed all the methodology and plans. And so they finally completed their first watershed master plan for each watershed. And we're in watershed number 1. So they looked at all the characteristics. They defined a watershed risk. And they looked at some concept solutions based on 4 factors, which was flooding, water quality, stream erosion, and hydro modification, which is changes in the hydrology of the watershed based on development. It also looked at areas where there were severe risk areas based on those 4 factors. And one of the areas was our portion of Rock Creek Channel from Lamar to Reeds. That was identified as flood risk that was on the high end and a water quality risk that was kind of in the moderate approach. And so based on that, well, we know that that's an area that we need to, fix all those concrete channels, and we've had some failures and things like that. And so it was a good idea. It was a good approach to take advantage of that. So we went to the county to say, what do we need to do to receive funding for a preliminary project study, or a PPS. So with this new approach, you have to receive approval from the Watershed 1 members. So staff met with them last week, and we got approval. So they've agreed to pay 50% matching funds for a PPS, and that an interlocal agreement will follow. So the PPS will develop and identify 3 proposed alternatives and cost estimates to address the building and street flooding, as well as hopefully water quality and stream erosion in this area. So once it's completed, we go on a list and compete with other projects for 50% construction funds. But I just had a meeting with Johnson County SMAC today, and they're flush with funds. So I think now's a good time to get this PPS in and just see what we can do and move forward. Then once we figure out the channel and does it need to be widened, or what we would recommend there, then we need to coordinate with all the other city properties that surround that area. What can we do with that land? There's been a lot of ideas on, solar panels, EV stations. So planning has a Planning Sustainable Places grant, so that we'll coordinate that and get an idea of, once we figure out the channel, what can we do to really, increase the aesthetics and really use that property. Olson has submitted a scope of services for the PPS at a cost not to exceed $196,150. And like I said, we'll receive 50% reimbursement from the county. So in your packet, originally we had a scope of work from Olson, and based on conversations with the mayor, she asked, well, what about with this increased rainfall events over time? What can they do about that? So I guess the county's in the process of reevaluating all the rainfall events and looking at that and coming up with factors to address that issue. So what they're going to do is, and the scope is in your package, it doesn't cost any more money, but they're going to first look at the 3 alternatives based on our original FEMA modeling. Then they're going to go back and come up with a factor. Okay, what if we decided to upsize that to meet future rainfall events? Look at the cost and look at what that would mean to the channel. And then this is all concept, so we can decide as a council, do we want to spend that extra money to do that when we get to the design phase?
Councilmember Davis?
Celia, does this include the portion of creek that goes from Lamar that's south of 61st Terrace to the tennis court, or does that only include the part that comes from the Johnson County buildings down?
So the focus area drawing showed those culverts that went back into Countryside where we have a project next year. It looked at, okay, if we increase that culvert, what can it do to the channel? So even though they're looking at that main channel, that would be another option of if we did anything upstream, such as the 61st Terrace, what would that do for the channel? So for our project next year, for our street project, we're actually looking at upsizing that just to, handle that. So they'll be studying that as part of this PPS.
There's one question that I have. I believe that there's one house in the floodplain at 61st Street, about just across from the tennis court.
Mm-hmm.
Does that have to come out of the floodplain at some point in time, or what's the situation with that?
So talk to Laura Smith about that. The county has a voluntary home buyout program. And so I think at some point, probably after we do this PPS, we can contact them and ask them, do they want to participate? And then they can decide whether to or not. But I think we'll learn more information about this, this whole channel with the PPS. So it doesn't really go upstream other than what I talked about. I mean, the upper reaches, they're not really studying that in detail, but as part of this whole plan, we'll probably get an idea of any improvements we would need to make.
Well,
It does not have to come out. So
Okay.
it would be an option that we would evaluate, but it would not have to come out of the floodplain.
The reason I'm asking is that there has been a flood event that I recall when I was still, since I've been here, that the stream overflowed through that house into the garage of the house across the street. And that was a one-time event that I'm aware of, but I don't know if that owner knows of that history.
So at some point we talked about sending a letter asking them if they would want to participate, but probably need a little more information before we do that.
Thank you.
Any
Thanks.
other questions?
All
Or
right, so
recommendation?
Go ahead and recommend that we take this to council consent.
Thank you.
Okay. The sixth item is consideration of a contract with AR Construction for sidewalk repairs on 51st Street between Dearborn and Woodson with Brent Morton. Hi, Brent.
Thank you very much. Just like you said, 51st Street sidewalk, between, Lamar and Reed's. We've received numerous complaints over the last couple of years. Within the last year, we did do that project between Dearborn and Woodson, kind of where we replaced some panels, saved the tree, had a bunch of heaving panels there. It is one of the worst sidewalks in town and the top 4 in our Stantec inventory. This is just kind of a replacement project, about 1,500 square feet of sidewalk. A lot of that sidewalk's curb integrated, so it's kind of not what you're used to seeing. So when it chips on the front, you can't replace the curb. It's all connected. So it's going through there, getting all those bad panels out, spot repairs. There's some curb closer to Lamar that we got to fix, since when the sidewalk's touching the curb, you kind of got to do both at the same time to do it right. Most of the work is between Lamar and Reed's. There's a few spot repairs. I mean, Lamar to Woodson, and there's a few spot repairs past that, but that's a majority of the work on that hill where it's kind of sketchy. It is a school zone, so a lot of kids walk through that area. We've got 50 grand allocated this year through the CIP for sidewalk and curb programs. We have 150 for next year, so we can do a little bit bigger project, hopefully, where we can knock out some of those other red ones through town. Those are a little more costly. It's kind of why we chose this one and try to get this one checked off the list, since we've already done some repairs on that corridor. Fix some ADA ramps with the street project too on Outlook this year. So we contracted with Olson. We did a lot of the work in-house, but just had to have them kind of put some drawings so we could bid the project. 3 bids were solicited. AR Construction was the lowest at $29,720. So looking for approval for contract with AR Construction to complete those sidewalk repairs. If the contract gets approved, hopefully we will have this completed by the end of the year. A lot of that's just weather driven. A lot of the contractors were busy this year, so some of the ones we usually use just couldn't squeeze it in their schedule. So just trying to get this one buttoned up and where we can move on to something next year. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, does that busyness account for the huge variance in the bid prices? I saw that this one was quite a bit lower than the rest.
So 2 of them I've used before. So AR we've used in town before, and GB Construction, and they're relatively close. GB is just super busy. And then I was kind of looking for that 3rd bid and couldn't find a contractor to bid on it. And Infrastructure Solution did our channel project, and they said they'd put a number at it, but I might not like it. But
While they're here, they'll throw something out.
yeah,
Okay.
so we haven't used it for any of that. They're not really a sidewalk company, more creek channels and stormwater pipe and stuff like that. So I doubt they bid on another sidewalk project for us, but just want to kind of see where they landed as well. So
Okay, great, thanks. Any questions? Boultinghouse.
Yeah, that was most of my question would have been just that. So I sounded like you answered it. So we have used AR Construction before.
yes, they're not a big company, so we didn't advertise this. We just selected like 4 contractors and 3 of them bid on it. But when you're in that 15 to 3,000 square foot of concrete. You know, they're about a 6, 7 man crew and they can handle that with some traffic control. Anything outside that scope, we'd be looking at the contractors we use with our street program and, you know, $2 to $3 million projects or 1.5. So, you know, they just got a lot less overhead for something this size. So that's kind of drives that cost down.
Any other questions? Okay, recommendation?
Recommend taking it to council and consent.
Okay. And Brent also has our last action item this evening, which is consideration of purchase of a 2022 Boss Snow Raider. That's a really fun word.
Yeah. So this is a new piece of equipment for Public Works. I think most of the council's been here for, we've taken on a lot more sidewalks, in the last 2 to 3 years. Basically, when we got the Gator we use now, or UTV, we were doing mostly trails. We used to contract that out. They just couldn't get to it fast enough the way the residents expect the trails to be open after the streets are open. So we brought that in-house, and the Gator works great for trails, you know, anything 6 foot or wider, good turning radius it's a great machine. As we started passing that ordinance to, you know, everybody's got to have their sidewalk clean. Might be, is it 48 hours? Okay. 48 hours. That it's not difficult for us, but we need to get our stuff done in a timely manner. And the Gator's the only piece of equipment we really have that can clean sidewalks in a timely manner. We've got some older parts of town, a lot of 4 foot sidewalk, which is still legal, but very hard to plow or use a snow blower. This is a newer piece of equipment. Went down with a couple of the crew guys. We tested one out. I mean, they've sold like 40 of them this year already, so it's a thing coming. We solicited bids. There's really only 2 companies in town that make anything comparable to this right now. So Boss is coming in with the low price and everybody seems to be happy with it. We talked to some other private companies that use them. I'm assuming there'll be more cities using them in the future. We also lost our Gator last year during a big storm. Just, you know, that's the only thing we got it broke. We tried to go with a snow blower. It's just tripled or quadrupled the time and you're still not getting as nice a job done. So this was in the 2023 budget. Just trying to move it up so we can have it for the 2022 to 2023 snow season.
And it is in the 2022 revised budget that you approved earlier this evening.
Thank you, Laura. It's been a long day. It's a little more green too. So the Gator we use now has just got a spinner on the back that spreads and throws ice melt, but you know, that gets in the grass and the stormwater system. This one's got a drop spreader, so it's just putting it on that 4 foot sidewalk. So less material, less stuff getting in the stormwater system. And it's also got a de-icing liquid for steps and stuff like that. So it should make our facility safer too. And if, you know, something breaks, we got backups. So, looking to approve a purchase with American Equipment for $16,929.72. And happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Davis.
Recommend we take this to consent.
I just have a quick question. Do we have any Public Works equipment right now that's leased? Or is everything
No.
we own everything?
I mean, as far as I know, the street sweepers paid for, and that was the last thing that I'm aware of that was kind of a lease purchase item. Yes. Okay. So yes.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Everyone okay with consent? Okay, you said you'd have that hot on the tail of the budget. Here it is.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. There are no discussion items, no further action items on our agenda this evening. So, Ms. Smith, any further department updates? Excellent. Any last comments for the good of the cause?
I know this is late. Could we ask a quick question? What is the status of Wild Oats right now, that building? Do we have an update on it?
No, I think it has been, from our understanding, it was leased to Goodwill and we haven't seen any plans that have walked through the door for any of their proposed renovations or improvements to the building.
Anything else?
I'd just like to say thank you to the chairs and to staff for such a huge agenda, keeping it within our time, basically. Very well done. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, with 8:41 it is, and no further discussion. That concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. This video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you very much.